Okay, Bez Hashem, we're going weiter in our shiurim on Sefer Yeshua. So this week's shiur is going to be a little bit different, a little bit more unique, because we're not going to be focusing on a pasuk. We're going to be focusing on different sugyas that we touched on last year, and hopefully we'll get some clarity and understanding a little more. And if the only thing we're going to get from this year is just a little bit Yediyas HaTorah, it's not so bad either. The pasuk we were discussing was pasuk Yudalad in Parak Aleph, Neshechem tabchem umeknechem Yeshu ba'oretz asher nasan lechem Moshe be'eva hayarden ve'atem tabru chamushim lefnei achechem kol giborei hachayil ve'azartem moisam. So, because the pasuk mentioned where the women and children of these two shvatim were going to be, so we were even on a few shilas. Shilah number one that we're going to discuss is that there's a Gemara and Shabbos and Ksubis that says that Kol Yitzil Lemlchamet based David get krisus kaisev leishtoi. So what happened in the wars that Yeshua fought? There were a lot of milchamas that were going on from here and on. Was there a concept that they should give a get krisus? That's question number one. And question number two, Bichlal, what's the din of נשים in fighting in Milchemet's mitzvah? It's a sugya that was a little bit bigger than I anticipated. We're not going to get through the whole sugya, I don't think. It's rechavim min hayam mamish. There's tremendous amounts to see. I was trying to be malakid a little bit, but we'll go through a few inyanim and try to be mevared. So the first question of Kol Yitzil Lemlchamet based David get krisus kaisev leishtoi. We started off with a balaturim in Parshas Matos that says that they even did that b'mei Moshe Rabbeinu. The issue is, on the surface, al kapanim, there's an issue, because Rashi in Ksubas on Daf Tes says that this takana was implemented by Yishai, David's father. So the Balaturim in Parshas Matzah says that this was also from the takana of Moshe Rabbeinu. So that's problem. That's one issue. The other issue is that the Gemara says in Kedushin, we touched on this question last week also, that the Gemara Kedushin, Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis, says that there's two ways that a isha is kindness atzma, either b'misas habal, either if the husband dies, or with the get. So how do we know that there's a concept of misas habal? So the Gemara brings a pasuk that from the pasuk by the people that go out to war, the Kayin that speaks to them before the war says to them, anybody that married a woman and didn't marry her, meaning that did erison and didn't do nisuin yet, should go and return to his home. Maybe he'll die in the war, and somebody else will take her, and then he'll never end up having nisuin, and it's going to be a horrible thing. So from here we see that Misa Sabal is matter, because how would it be that somebody else could take her? Elamai must be that by Pen Yomis B'Milchama, that's what allows the Isha to become Muteris. So after the Misa Sabal, the Isha's Muteris L'Chaloila. Right? Just like when like the Gemara Kedushin says in Beis and Kedushin, that once she has Kedushin, she's a Surah Kulan L'Kehekta, she's also to everybody. And over here, she's going to be mutter to everybody. So Shver and the Balaturim that we mentioned in Parshas Matos, because how could the Gemara learn out Misa Sabal from Ish Achi Kechena? But L'Chayra, he says that they gave a get. So if the get worked, so then she's being mutaris because of a get, not because he died in the war. So this is the question. So there are many terutzim said, and I want to go through a few of them, just the basics of, I guess the rate of what's going on over here. So first and foremost, we find in the Chuvas from the Shalom Eshiv, it's hard to find them. I mean, even with the newer print, I don't think they made it any more Masudar in a sense, but Uncle Panim, they were malakit from his Svarim, and he wrote many Svarim other than the Shalom Eshiv also, but they were malakit from all the Svarim, they were Masadrit al Parshas HaTorah. It's called Divrei Shol, which I think somebody actually wrote also, al HaTorah. So in Parshas Matos, he says like this. He brings a Balaturim, that says that there's a remes, what the Gemara says in Shabbos, Shekal Yitzay L'Mulchamas Beis David increases Kaisiv L'Ishtoi, Shilot Yizakik L'Yivim HaChalitza, that there shouldn't be any issues with Yivim HaChalitza. And he says that also the Milchemes Moshe was the same thing. And that's why it says, V'avar L'Chem Kol Chalutz, it's referring, even though the literal translation of the pasuk means every soldier, but V'avar L'Chem Kol Chalutz means to be able to get away from Chalitza. And he says, L'cher it's a remez rachak, L'cher it's a, it's like it's stretching out an idea over here. It's not really what we're talking about here, B'chlal. So what's it got to do? And then he says, weiter, he says, it's fair because this pasuk that the Baal Term is going on is said specifically to Bnei Gad and Bnei Ruvain, like we've been talking the last couple of shiur, right? Now, if you're telling me that Kol Yetzel Milchemes Beis David get Krisis Kaisev Lishtoi, l'cher that would apply to anybody that's fighting this war, whether you're in Shevet Gad or Shevet Ruvain or Shevet Shimon, it doesn't matter. So he writes like this, L'fiani es daiti inyanochin. So he says like this, he thinks this is the right mahalch. The ve'emes l'cher zahoya meisar ha-betachin. It would take away from the betachin that people were having in the war. Sharei hayu kaisim get krisis l'ishtem, because they were writing this get to their wives. V'rei Yisrael hayu betuchem b'shem Hashem ki yeh be'ezra. The whole point that it get was that if they're going to die, then they're not going to fall to Yibum. Whether going to war with the kavanah that they're going to die in the war, that's not a good morale to go into the war to fight like that. That's not a good idea. So obviously that's obviously it doesn't sound like it's lechatchila to do this. See, he says with tzarach loymar, the gam hakoyin mashuach mulchama yamachos al kama dvarim. And the Kohen Mashuach will talk about all kinds of things to give them the pep talk, like we spoke so many times with the Chazak ve'amatz in the Psukim here in Yeshua. And we spoke this idea many times also from the Malbim and from others, that the Torah doesn't want us to be semich al hanes. And im kol zeh, with all this, the betachon is still very stark. He brings the Gemara brachas, Taf Lamed Beis, the kol hasemich al that anybody who's relying on whatever it is that an ace is going to happen to them, so Hakadosh Baruch Hu doesn't do an ace for them, and the same would be over here also. So you can't be semich al ace. You have to go fight the war this dark design. Now you want to say that there are nisim when you're fighting, because you're doing your ishtadlus, so then you have after that's true. V'nekvar omer b'saita dafem taladam at Beis, the Gemara says in Saita, the hani mili l'mulchemes harishus, that this that we're talking about. That everybody has to go, that people go away me'orchel milchama, that's milchemes harishus. Aval milchemes mitzvah kol yotzim, but by milchemes mitzvah everybody has to go out to war. Afilu chosim echedra b'kal mechupasa. That even a chosim and even a kala they have to go and be mishtadaf in the milchama. See, he says he says with this he wants to understand what the Baal Turim is saying. The lama amru dafka kol yetzel milchemes Beis David. Why are we saying specifically, why does the Gemara say specifically that anybody that goes out to fight the war for Beis David? Then Yamar Sham Besaita, the Gemara Badir on Daf Mandalur and Beis says that the Milchemes Beis David was laharvacha, was to be marviach and to be marchiv the gvulim of Eretz Yisrael. And it was lavdafka so muchach that lavdafka was so clear that they had the betachim that they needed, because it wasn't a Milchemes mitzvah. And Memela, that's why they wrote to get krisis, but it wasn't everywhere, specifically by the Milchemes Beis David, because that was laharvacha. It's interesting. It's just the Yerushalmi says in Peah that by Bimei David, even though they were tzaddikim, but they would go in battle, they would fall into battle. But by Bimei Achav, in the days of Achav, even though they were Eved Avodah because there was no lashon hara between them, they everybody came back from the war. It was a fascinating thing, but the Chavetz Chaim brings this in Shmir Salashim. So the Fisa Tzarech Bir. Because the Gemara says over there in Mandalur with Beis and Soita, the Milchemes Yeshua Lichbar Shabbat Dvar Choyvelu Kuli Alma, that everybody agrees that the Milchama of Yeshua to conquer Eretz Yisrael is a Milchemes Choyva, which according to one Mandamar, the Gemara is even stronger than a Milchemes Mitzvah. V'imkein Lama HaYitzrichim Leile Chalutz, the Hainu Lichter get krisus. Why would it be that they have to ride to get krisus? L'chara they're fighting, they're doing a mitzvah. V'zet Siva Moshe Yeshua Lebeis Milchamta, and he says that this concept of that the Baal Turim is saying that they would get into their wives, Moshe gave this over to Yeshua for when Yeshua would be fighting his wars also. which is interesting because I don't know that we see that anywhere, and I'm assuming, don't know if he has be'etzem a makar for that or he's just taking the Baal Turim to the next step. Achnir the be'emes Shai Yisrael ho yitzin lichbash. Avada, all the other Shvatim are also going out to conquer Eretz Yisrael. Aval b'nei Gadim leRuven shalachu nachlasam be'emes lo ho yitzrichem leilech. B'nei Gadim leRuven already have their chelik. It's not in Eretz Yisrael, it's outside Eretz Yisrael. And the MS, they don't have to go to war. Rak Moshe Rabbeinu kotzav alayim shlei aniu es b'nei Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu got angry at them and told them that you're not allowed to leave Klal Yisrael behind. Right? And we spoke that once Moshe Rabbeinu got upset at them, they were mechuyev to fight the war together with the rest of Klal Yisrael. Now the Gemara site also says that there's really three types of wars. And we're going to get back to this probably a few more times. This is Melchemet Rishos. That's, you want to be markev the Gvulos of Eretz Yisrael. This is Melchemet Mitzvah, or Melchemet Chayva, getting rid of Amalek, getting rid of the Zainumas. But then there's also the preventative battles, and you know that, let's say Hamas is trying to start up with you. So you go and you can take preemptive measures to make sure that they don't come to you and go beat up Hamas, or whoever it might be. And the Rambam speaks this out very clearly at the beginning of Hilchos Malachim, and it comes from this Gemara, Mendal on the Beis and Saita. So this, that even if Be'etzem, Shevi Gad and Reuven are not mechuyev in the Melchama, or mechuyev in the Kibush of Eretz Yisrael, together with the rest of Klal Yisrael, we explained already that from the Brisker Rav that and others that it definitely was a chiyuv for them to go la'achar ha'mais, but mitchila the zikr wasn't. So it's not any worse. So Dr. Shalomesha, it's not any worse than fighting against the goyim that are coming to start up with them. So according to one Manda Amar that says that that's a Melchemes Rishos, so according to that Manda Amar, then you would have to write a get l'ishtoi, and that's a pshat that it says kol zeh she'omar she'omar lechem kol cholutz lechem davka, because lechem meaning to you, to even those that are fighting the war, you would think that it's so. Really, what the Shalom Eshev is saying, that this concept of get krisis kaisev leishtoi is only by a Melchemes Rishos, and the din of Bnei Gad and Reuven fighting this war had a din of Melchemes Rishos, or no worse than fighting a war to get the goyim away from them, because they already fought the battle a long time before to get rid of they already kaivish the land of Sicha and Vaig way before, as we spoke, that was Muftach Tavram Avinu by the Bris Ben Abasar. We saw this in the way of David was Masber Brisker Rav over there with the Shevet Menashe. But the concept really is that's when they would have to write a get krisis kaisev l'ishtoi by Melchemes Mitzvah, not because that's going to take away from the betachim. It's a very interesting situation how this get is being situated. And with this we could answer very well the kasha that everybody asks on the Baal Turim for the Gemara Kedushin Daf Yud Gimel. The Misa Sabal Nilmad mi Pen Yomis b'Melchama. We learn out Misa Sabal in Kedushin, and the Mishnah in Kedushin on Daf Beis. We learn out Misa Sabal from Pen Yomis b'Melchama. Maybe he'll die in the war. V'sha'achi kechel, another man will take her. How could another man take her if she's still married? Elamai, that when he dies, it's going to be mutter for somebody to take his wife. But over here, l'chayra, he had to get krisus. That there was already get krisus that they're up on Melchemes Moishas, and then the get was going to be matter. Well, the Fimasha Kasavno as he shapit, but Kafi, what we just explained, it works out very well. Why? The Ve'emes Ikra get krisus who kadesh like tizakik liyibum. The etzem, the whole concept of this get is to make sure that this woman doesn't fall to yibum. Like the Baal Turim writes, cholutz is lashon chalitza. Maybe when the pasuk says maybe that acher is referring to the yavam. Zok the Gemara that yavam is loy nikra acher. So in a certain sense, it's almost like the Gemara is saying that we're not talking about a case of where there's going to be yibum. And being that we're talking about a case of somebody that already has children, and they're not going to, it's not shaykh yibum. There's no shaykhis to being zoykik yibum. Shuvla kasu get krisus. Anybody that had children didn't have to ride to get krisus. And he wanted to say that really it's Miyushav, this whole idea of where this whole concept of get krisus kaisi lish came from, to be miyash of what's going on. Because the Gemara says in Shabbos and Bama Behema Daf and Vov that Kol Yotze L'Melchamas Beis David get Krisus Kosev L'Ishtoi, because Yishai told him when he was going to fight the war, Vesarubasam Tikach. What's Vesarubasam Tikach? That's the get. And that's this concept that Rashi says in Shubas that Yishai was the one that was Masakin. Why didn't they write the get when they were still in their houses before they left to the war? It sounds like they were only wrote the get while they were in the war. So this is Lamaisa a big shmooze where and when and how they wrote the get. Rashi near Gasham, this is what the Shalom Meishav writes. Rashi was sort of, was a misera to this, because Rashi says Shekosvu b'tseisam oibel milchama. Either they wrote it when they went out or they wrote it during the war. But it's not mashma one way or the other. But if you look at the Marsha over there in Shabbos, the Marsha speaks about it. And he says, right, the Melchama that David HaMelech was going to fight, where Yishai told him, Sarabasam Tikach, was Be'etzem HaMelchamas Chayva. Meaning this wasn't the standard, meaning the case of where Yishai was telling him to, the Melchama that Yishai was telling him to write this get, it wasn't a standard Melchamas Harishus of the regular Melchamas Harishus of David HaMelech, like the Gemara says in Saita. But it was a Melchamas Chayva, because what we're talking about over there, the Plishtim Neswa Aleim, the Plishtim gathered together over there, Lehoitrichim Leget Krisus. In the Etzem war, where Yishai told David to Vesarubasam Tikach, the Etzem he didn't need to write a get. Why? Because that was a Melchamas Chayva, because the Melchama with Goliath was the Melchamas Chayva. Why was the Melchama of Goliath the Melchamas Chayva? So Dr. Shalom Meishav, why not? Goliath came out and cursed the Marochis Israel every day. For twice a day, Bismai Kriyash the Gemara says. And he says, why are you fighting with me? He says, give me one person and we'll have a duel, we'll face off. And we'll fight together. And this went on for 40 days. Nobody had to be there. They only had to have one fighter that was willing to fight with Goliath. Who was the person that was chosen to fight with Goliath? That was David HaMelech. Memela, Yishai told him, Mitchila, you should really write this get Krisus. Why? Because it's a Melchamas Rishus. It's not the Etzem of Melchamas Chayva. But once Goliath came out every day and he said, I want to fight with only one person. Who's that one person? That person ended up being David HaMelech. Could have been anybody, but it ended up being David HaMelech. So now for David it became a Melchamas Chayva. So for he himself, he doesn't have to write a get Krisus Kosev L'Ishtoi. So in the Etzem Takana of Kol Yetzel Melchamas Beis David get Krisus Kosev L'Ishtoi, we already see the clarity of it, that if it's for Melchamas Harishus, then you do have to follow this Takana. And if you're Melchamas Chayva, then you don't have to. Because Yishai was telling David to take this get Krisus even by a war where he was the only one that was doing it when it was a Melchamas Chayva. Meaning even though it was a Melchamas Chayva, but Be'etzem, he didn't have to. Which would sound like really that even by Melchamas Chayva, you would have to give get Krisus Kosev L'Ishtoi. So how does he emphasize that it's going to take away from the B'tachon? I'm not sure, but I'll go upon him. That's what the Azay Shteit Shalom Meishav. Okay, that's number one. Number two, the Har Tzvi Pesach Frank in Har Tzvi Al Torah and Parshas Matos, he also says that we're talking about two separate takanas. So the Parsha to learn this. He says, Bimei Moshe, they made a takana for somebody that doesn't have children, that he shouldn't have to be to fall to Yibum. And Bimei David, they made a takana, Shekol Yetzel Melchamas Beis David, even if he has a child, Kidei, that you shouldn't run into any issues of agunas. A separate Inyan of agunas. Why? I don't know. Maybe it has to do with the fact that we'll see later that some of the Mefarshim want to learn that it's lav dafka if they get killed in the war, but if they just don't come back. So if they were in the shvi, if they were taken captive, so if you give a get, then it's going to help for that also. I mean, it's not al tonight that the person is going to die in the milchama, but it's even going to be al tonight that the person doesn't come back for the milchama. The person just doesn't want to go back home. Maybe it would work for that also. Well, let's see. Let's explore this a little more. I mean, even though that it's not mashma, this idea that the higher tzvi is saying, it's not mashma exactly like the idea of Baal Turim, because Baal Turim says that the takana of David was the zelba takana of Moshe Rabbeinu, and here he's saying it's two separate takanas in a certain knife, and it's we already explained a little bit how it's shaykh to answer this. Now, l'chayr understand stama ha'ara. I don't know any more information about this. They bring from the Sefer Chassidim. Although I can't say for sure it's in the Sefer Chassidim, I thought it was in the Sefer Chassidim. I looked for it, I didn't find it. It's very hard to find things in Sefer Chassidim, but it comes from other sources also. It's brought in Maracher Zerua, and it's also brought in the Sefer HaParnes, that if a person dies al Kiddush Hashem, that you don't marry his wife, that his wife stays an almana, to show everyone that she was somebody that was Mekadosh Shem Shemayim. So that these people that, I don't know if it's so good at the sugya that we're learning here, because we're saying that they, I don't know, maybe they didn't hold that it was Kiddush Hashem. It was a different din of the Melchama, which would maybe help Yimiyasha Vakasha, that we'll see later that the Minchas Chinuch says, the Minchas Chinuch has on the Chinuch of Mitzvah Tav Chav Hey, when he talks about the Mitzvah of Hachar and Tacharimim, by the killing the Zayin Umis, he said that if it's not a sakana, he says you should go and kill them, even if it's not in a Melchama, even Bizman Hazeh, as long as it's not a sakana. Cheretzam on the Zach. What does sakana got to do with the l'chayra? Is the l'chayra the whole matzav of a Melchama is pikuach nefesh? So it sounds like even in a Melchama, you have to try to do what you can where things aren't going to be pikuach nefesh. For certain people, the way that they fight, the way that they are, they have such a strong betachin in themselves or in their army or in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in a sense that the way that they're going to fight the wars, that nothing could happen to them. Your average soldier, when he's fighting in the war, doesn't think that anything's going to happen to him. He knows it's in the back of his mind, but he's going with Dazash Darkite. He's not thinking about falling. So maybe that's why it's not considered Kiddush Hashem. I don't know. It's hard to know. I don't know. Hopefully we'll get back to this at some point, but we'll see. And the Hartzvi goes on to explain what the Rashi says in Ksubas, that David learned this idea from his father Yishai, and just from the fact that Rashi says he learned it from Yishai and didn't say that he learned it from Moshe Rabbeinu, it would sound like that what David HaMelech was doing over here was he was being Moshe on the Takana of Moshe. And he says that, from the pasuk of Ishachi Kechena, it's not mistaber to say that the pasuk is talking about whether they had children, whether they didn't have children. Although there is a very strong kasha here that the Kavod Kashai, the Chalkas Yared asks, that l'chayra it says Miha Isha She'eris Isha V'Leilakacha. So we're talking about a woman who had erisin and didn't have nisuin, right? And the lashon of the Mishnah in Saita is also Kala, Chasen Mechedra v'Kala Mechapasa, which we'll see later that Chasen Mechedra is mashma that it's after he did the Bilas mitzvah, because if it would be before, he's Isaac b'mitzvah patim and mitzvah. So if it's a Melchemes mitzvah, so that if it's a Melchemes or a shos, he's Isaac b'mitzvah, and he definitely doesn't have to go out to war. But if it's a Melchemes or a shos, then he doesn't have to go out to war. So it's Kala Mechupasa l'chera t'shayla. We'll see. We'll get to the Radbaz in Parak Zayin Hilchos Malachim. We'll get to that in a little bit. But I'll go upon him as I. So, even though the Gemara says that, so he says, l'chayr is welcome to ask, because the Gemara says that Ema man acher yavam, right? So the Gemara says, who's that talking about? That's the yavam. So you see from here that the Gemara holds that the pasuk could be talking about where he didn't have a son, and there is a chance of mitzvahs even happening over here. So we're back to square one, because where there's no son, she's going to be mutaris alidei get. So how do you know that Misa is going to be matter? And even if she is going to be mutaris alidei get, so then there's vater no mitzvahs yibu. So it's not shaykh to say that acher is yavam. So what are we talking about here? So interestingly enough, we have another tshuva from the Shalom Eshiv. This is in Tlisa Chelek Gimel Siman Lamed Vav, that this is dafka in Melchemes Rishos, they would. Oh no, this is Yana. This is Yana Shalom that I said before. There's other people bring it, and this is Dafka B'Mulchamas or Schuster Radigat B'Mulchamas Mitzvah Lehoyitzrichim. They didn't need this because the mitzvah of the Mulchama and the B'tachim that they had Nakash Baruch Hu was going to protect them. And Mamela, that's why Vishaychi Kechen is talking about a Mulchamas Mitzvah, and we could definitely learn out from over there that Misa Sabal is Matir because over there they did not write a get creases. And another teretz we could say is that Dafka, somebody that was Mukhrach, somebody that was Mamash Mitzvah to go to this war would write get creases lishtoi, but somebody who wasn't Mechuyev, then we're not Mechayiv him to give a get because, he doesn't have the, he's not really part of this mitzvah, so then Mechatesi, he could get out of this mitzvah from Bishaki Kechana. Also, this Lachara is a Makam Yun, I don't know if this is 100% true, but from here they want to bring a raya that Misa Sabal is going to be matir because we said that he shouldn't go to war. Because if he does go to war and he doesn't give a get, so then ish achi kechem. Okay. Now, let's go to the Kabbalah Kashaisa's question. So the Kabbalah Kashaisa is a sefer from the Chelkas Yoav, who was a Talmud of the Avnei Nezer, and he wrote the Chelkas Yoav, which is Truvis on Sugyas and many, many different interesting ideas, interesting halachas. The Kabbalah Kashaisa is very Geshmak Lamdisha questions, 103 Lamdisha questions, and over the years there were different people who tried to see how many terutim to however many kashas they could come up with. The very Geshmak kashas, it's kedai to spend time on it. Maybe we should do a series on that one day too, Mitzvah. I don't know, but he says l'chari read the pasuk. The pasuk says that we're talking about arusa because it says miyo isha she'eres isha v'lelukacha. So even if we're going to say that Misa Sabal is not going to be matir, but meaning even if Be'etzah Misa Sabal is not going to be matir her to marry other people, why isn't there, meaning what was the das that she went into this kedushin about, right? Now, there's a svara to say, I'm skipping a lot of lumdus over here. I don't know exactly all the pratim. But there's a svara to say over here that when she went into this kedushin, she only had in mind that she's going to be married to this person and nobody else, right? And she never had in mind that after Misa Sabal, she's still going to be Osir. So because this was her das when she went into this kedushin, so then there's no makom to say that she shouldn't be married to him after he dies. Meaning, maybe when she's Azor, and Mechatesi, just because the husband dies, she's mutter. You need a pasuk to tell me that. It's not something that I could have learned at Misvara. I think Rabbi Chana talks about this in Kevetz Biurim also. I didn't look for it, but I'll upon him. It's lav dafka so pasha that just Misa Sabal is, like the wall falls down and then she could go out. It's not like that. That would be the svara of Misa Sabal, but from the fact that we need to come on to pasuk and to darshan, it could be it's not so pasha like that. But being that she didn't have a das that she's going to be stuck with this isser after she was married to Mitchila by the Everson, so I to the hachi that she should be usher after the Misa Sabal. She wasn't niskadish to this person. By Nisuin, it's not so, because it's chibas bia, or a person makes sure that his bilas is not a bilas nos. So he's going more Michael, like the Gemara says in Baba Kam on Kofyut, by a story where a woman, fell to a mukashkin, right? So the mukashkin was the yavam was a mukashkin. Zataita the mukashkin, the layas gotcha, so then it's not going to work, right? So unless you want to say that this is svara, that she wants to get married anyways, right? Then maybe this is svara of tavla meser tein too, right? But Taisus says over there that we don't say that only by arusa. We only say that by arusa, not by nesua. So in Cain by nesua, it's not shaykh this heter, only with the matter of misa. And this we don't learn out from the pasuk that this we can't learn out from the pasuk that we're talking about in arusa. Shalom Eshiv says in another place that the only time we say that it's totally in her das of the kedushin is only when there's a new thing came up in between him and her after the kedusha was already chal. Meaning it was a then it's habed over chodesh. He says. So he says, oh, she got sick after or he got sick after the kedushin. So then he says that is gotcha. So this is something that happened afterwards, and I didn't know. There's no way we could have known about this. There's no way we could have known about this. So Mamela is gotcha. He never had in mind to have a kedushin like this. But Misa Sabal is it's not a toast because he's going to die anyways. So she suffered a kibla, so she's stuck with it and she can't go out. Right? So that's why you need to have a pasuk to teach me Misa Sabal. The Argadol and Simon Dalit has a big arichas over here to be miyash of this kashem anyways. And he says we don't say the sumdana of, maybe if he would have known she wasn't Mekadishim, she wasn't nachas to the Kedushin Adaita the Hachi. Because he brings Ishtal to the idea that Tosis says that by any Nara Marasa, that was Mazana, so the Torah says that she gets skila. So how do you have a case that she gets skila? Why? Maybe it's a Hasra Safik. Maybe the Orus is going to die, and then the Kedushin is going to be in his battle Mafreya. So if the Kedushin is going to be in his battle Mafreya, so then they were never married, so then she was allowed to marry that person that she did, which is what the Gemara calls Shem Yechap al Basachoisai. There's no date on the get, like the Gemara says in Gittin Daf Yud Zayin. But even if in the end the Orus didn't die, B'shas the Avera, it's only Asra Safik because maybe he will die. Right? And Taishus in Gittin on the Lamed Gimel, the Bamaslav Afkinu asked this question. That really by any Eishes Ish should really be Asra Safik because maybe he sent the get and was Mevatel the get, and then the Rabbonim Mafkia the Kedushin. We don't want to get involved in the controversial shilas of being Mafkia Kedushin, but it's a real sugya that needs to be dealt with very seriously. But Taishus says that we go by Saroiv, the Chazaka, that it's not going to be Mevatel the get, it's not going to be Mevatel the Kedushin. So there's much more of a chash that the person is going to die because Akolam Isay so even if you're not going to be, meaning that we're not saying that there's a right that he's going to die, but Al Pi Pashtus, there's more of a chance. It's more common to hear a story where a husband died than where he was mevatel the shlichus v'digat. Okay, that's some other answers. A couple of more answers to this question. So there's a Sefer Shari Deya. So there's a print of the Balaturim that has ha'aros on the Adaris in the back. And there's also a lot of different Likutim, but not nice Likutim there. Ha'aros on the Balaturim itself. Then in the back there's nice Likutim of, bring many, many different Sheinim Armakaimis and different Shilas, different Sugis, ha'aros on the different place in the Balaturim. So it brings there many truths into this Kasha in Parshas Matos. And we'll just go through two of them that's brought over there. Teretz number 1, they bring over this from Sefer Shar Deya and Chelik Beis. He says that it's lav dafka that the reason why they gave a get was in case he would die and shouldn't fall to Yibum, but if anything else happens also, Mipnei Igun, sort of like what we saw from the Har Tzvi. And he says Pen Yomus v'ish achi kechena, that the meaning it's not a steer to the pasuk, meaning the Baal Term is not a kash on the pasuk. Because the concept of Kol Yetzel Melchemes Beis David get Krisis Kreiselish, even if you want to say that Takana was around, we made Moshe Rabbeinu. So the concept is: are we trying to take him away from Yibum, or we're trying to take him away that this woman should be able to get married if he doesn't come back from the war, regardless of whether he dies or not? The Gemara says that Pen Yomus, that the Gemara darshans Misa Sabal. The Gemara says that we know Misa Sabal because the pasuk says Pen Yomus v'Sh'avi Kechena, that the heter is dafka from the Misa Sabal, but it's lav dafka Misa Sabal in the sense that the husband is dead, but just that the husband is never going to return. Anything that's going to severely hold back the husband from ever coming back after the war, and the concept is that the pasuk is using Misa as a sense where the husband is never going to, where he's never going to come back. It's like sort of a base avto, the other types of ways that he could fall in a milchama and he'll never come back. Because let's say he gets so severely injured, that's not shaykh for him to stay married anymore. So you give a get, so then you don't have to live with a person like in that condition anymore. I mean, of course, there's all these beautiful stories, but we're not talking about that now. Fine. Because Be'etzim the pasuk could have written Pen La Yashuv Min HaMilchama. What's Pen Yamus? So the Ikra Heter comes from the fact that it comes from Misa Sabah. Okay. That's something that we touched on also. Okay. Now, another very interesting teretz. I think this was a nice idea. I don't know if it's going to be Ois Gehalten with everybody, and let's see. The Sefer Kinas Pinchas, Eben Ezer Simen Lamed Hey says, this that the pasuk says Misha Eres Isha was part of the announcement that the Kohen was machos, the Kohen HaMashuach was machos before the war, and it's a mitzvah Sasem and Torah. And he says that this concept of Kol Yetzel Melchemes Beis David Gekrisis Kaisav L'Ishtay was a takana pratis, and if you wanted to, you did. If you didn't want to, you didn't have to. I guess, to borrow the terms of the Shalom Eshiv, that if a person had very stark betachon that he was going to come back, so he didn't write a get L'Ishtay, the person wasn't really sure, wasn't so confident, so then he did write a get L'Ishtay. I don't know, right? And, maybe that's what existed by Moshe Rabbeinu also. But he says, let's say another Bezdin of Moshe Rabbeinu, or even the Bezdin of David HaMelech, or even a Bezdin of a different generation, would want to be Mevatel this takana. They're able to be Mevatel it, then it's not an issue. Why? Because this takana is like a Eitz Tova, or to quote his Lashon exactly, L'Tovas HaKlal. So he says, L'Fizeh, when the pasuk says that the Kohen HaMashuach makes an announcement, Pen Yamas Ushachi Kecheno, so that's a mitzvah deraisa, and the Torah doesn't say anything about the takana of this get, and Mamela comes out clear from the Gemara like that, and the makar of the meaning that it was a nice idea. So if you want to do it, you did it. If you didn't want to do it, you didn't have to do it. So it doesn't have to share what the Gemara says about the Shachi Kechena for Misa Sabal, because it's very, the general, I think the concept is saying like this, the general consensus of the soldiers that were fighting in the Milchama, they were doing that because that was the mitzvah Hashem. That's a mitzvah deraisa that they had. And the people that were Chayz Merach HaMilchama, they were doing the right thing. Now you want to say, what about the people that wrote a get for, so if they wanted to, they could. If they didn't want to, they didn't have to. So, the Makar that Takanos in the Gemara Shabbos, like we said, and it's Mavur over there, that sometimes there were Torahs b'tzeisam l'Milchama, and they had the right to get during the Milchama. And the crews, the announcement of Pen Namus, was said right away. So it could be that the crews was said even before they had a chance to write the get. Maybe he tried to send the get, but it was too late, and he died before that. It would be hard to know. And over there it also says Pen Namus, because the pasuk was written before the stakana. And he says, Chutz mizeh, it's a toast, because it's a Beferish Mishnah and cited that from Gimel, that Shomer Tzavim is Bechlal, the people that have to go to the Milchama. Even if he heard that his brother died in the war, he still has to be Chayzer, and he says that that's what the pasuk says, Pen Yamus. But by Yevama, the get's not going to work to be mad to her. So, Al-Karchach, we're talking about a case where he didn't give her the get yet. But if you look in the Tzitz Eliezer in Chelik Tezvav Simen and Zayin, he's also on this kash on the Baal Turim. And he says, if this was the Takana of Moshe Rabbeinu, if it's taka true like the Baal Turim says, so why was the Gemara toilet in the Melchem's Beis David? So he says, Apalpi, that the Etzem Yisrael, that the idea of this concept was created by Moshe, but it wasn't Niskabel in Klal Yisrael like a Takana Klalis that everybody accepted. This minig wasn't Nispashet B'chol Yisrael. It was only Nispashet B'chol Yisrael b'mei David and during the days of David's battles. And there was only specific families that were makabel on themselves to do the stakana. But that was before David came around. That was still David's times. But David was matel takana zayt al kulam with teras takana kavua. And he brings the lashon of the Meiri in Shabbos that says that that's darka shel Beis David la'olam. That's always the minhag of Beis David for always and forever. That's how they run their milchamas. Okay, that's Adkan part 1. Part 2 is the Gemara Saita. We're talking about if Nashim are mechuyev in wars or not. So Gemara Saita, Dafam Daled Amud Beis, Pamedvar Mamurim, that these people go back Merach Melchama, B'Melchemes Rishus. That's dafka by Melchemes Rishus. Melchemes Mitzvah, Hakol Yaitz, and everybody has to go out. Afilu Chasam Echedra v'Kala Mechupasa. Even a Chasim from his room and a Kala from her chuppah. We rhyme it on the difference of the Lashonis over here, which we'll get back to in a little bit. Amar Yehuda b'Met Var Mamurim. That's the Melchemes Mitzvah. Aval b'Melchemes Chayva, Hakol Yaitz, and Afilu Chasam Echedra v'Kala Mechupasa. Melchemes Mitzvah, people are Chayzim Erech Yom Melchama. But when are the people not Chayzim, when everybody has to stay? That is by Melchemes Chayva. Zakti Gemara, Amr Yechanan, Rishus D'Rabbanon, Zui Mitzvah Reb Yehuda. Mitzvah D'Rabbanon, Zui Chayv Reb Yehuda. Meaning that that's the machlokes of Reb Yehuda and the Tanna Kama. So, Amar Rava. The Gemara continues, Amar Rava, Melchames Yeshua Lichbaish, Divrei HaKol Chayva. The Melchames of Yeshua to conquer Eretz Yisrael, everyone agrees that's a Chayva. And Melchames Beis David, it's L'Ravacha, Divrei HaKol Rishus. Any Melchames of Beis David, we mentioned this earlier, that the L'Ravacha, to expand the land of Eretz Yisrael, that's Divrei HaKol Rishus. Keep Plig wins the Machlekes, Rabbi Yehuda and the Tanna Kama, we mentioned this idea also, that when they're guided to prevent the Goyim from coming to Eretz Yisrael, so then you're allowed to fight them also. So Markar LeMitzvah, Markar LeRishus. So that's where it is Machlekes Rabbi Yehuda and Tanna Kama. One calls it a Melchemes Mitzvah, and the other one calls it a Rishus. Zok the Gemara, Nafka Mina LaOisik BeMitzvah Patam LaMitzvah. This is LaOisik BeMitzvah Patam LaMitzvah. So the Gemara explains what exactly are they arguing about. So Rava says by the Melchames of Yeshua to conquer Eretz Yisrael from the Canaanim, everybody holds that that's a Melchames Chayva, and everybody has to go to the Melchama. So one of the Marmakomis that keeps on coming back up is the Marcheshes in Simchov Beis. So the Marcheshes was killed in World War II. He was the Rav in Vilna, and my Rebbe, Reb Chaim Ozer Gerelik, had the Marcheshes as his sandik in Vilna. And he says that even by the Shuva Umas, there's a mitzvah to kill them. Like the pasuk says, "Ki hacharim tacharime." The Gemara says the Gemara is referring to the Kvishas Eretz Yisrael. The Gemara doesn't talk about the mitzvah of killing the Canaanim. It talks about the Kvishas Ha'aretz, the Kibush Ha'aretz. Why? And because the Mishnah says, "Avkal Yetza Mechupasa," and by the mitzvah of hacharim tacharime, l'chayra it's not the nashim are not mitzvah because nashim are not b'nois milchama, but Kibush Ha'aretz or however you're going to look at the mitzvah of Kibush Ha'aretz, so it's a chelik of mitzvahs Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, so nashim are mechuyev in that. This whole shmuz, and really what the Marcheshes is talking about is, are women mechuyev in Parsha Zachar? So are they mechuyev in the mitzvah of Mechiyas Amalek? L'chayra it's totally in that. And that's where the whole shmuz comes up, and that's what everybody's very busy with. I didn't want to take the Parsha Zachar route, because it's not relevant to our Indian over here, B'chlal. But that's the idea. The Rambam says in Hilchos Molchem Perek Hey that if the goyim are coming towards you for a war, then it's already B'chlal Melchemes Chayva. And Rabbi Yehuda calls that a Melchemes Mitzvah. Now the Rambam paskins like Rabbi Yehuda throughout this whole inyan, and that's what all the Mefarshei Rambam speak out. The Tanna Kama calls it a Melchemes Rishus biyachas to Melchemes Mitzvah, that you're not Chezer Melchama, and Nafkamina is L'Isik b'Mitzvah Shepatam in a Mitzvah. That if a person is Isaac, and even any Mitzvah Kalsha, he's pater from this Mitzvah that's going to come to him at that time. Like the Gemara Bab Kama says that if he's busy being a Shomer, he doesn't even have to go give the tzedakah to the ani that comes to the door. Ayin Sham, Taisus over there on Nun Vavam and Beis and Bab Kama Bigarichas. Okay, so that's all good. Now let's start talking about where Nashim fit into the picture over here. So first and foremost, just a Geshmaka Ha'ara, that's Ketai to know that this Lashon of Chasam Echedra, V'kal Mechupasa, is a Lashon of a Pasuk in Yoel, Parak Beis Pasuk Dazayin. And if you look in the Mefarshim over there, the Radak says over there, Afilu HaChatzon Shahele L'Smeichem Ishta Yetzei Mechedra, V'chein HaKala Tetzei V'beis Chupasa, V'achedra Shazachar, V'chein B'Metzudas. Metzudas also brings that, so it's, so it's talking about two different things. The Chassan and the Kala, we're not talking about the same person. especially since we said that the Chasani Cheskel speaks this out in the Tosefta. He says by Chas and it says Chedrei, because that's talking about after he already did the mitzvah. So he's not Torah, but he did the mitzvah like the Amor says in Brachas and Sukkah. Because before that, he was Isik b'mitzvah and he's parted from other mitzvahs. Masha'enkein Kalas Yitzah Filu Mechel Pasa means before she did the mitzvah, and she doesn't have a din of being Isik b'mitzvah, and also she's not Mechuyev in Peri V'Rivya. So it's very interesting. This is going to play a big role in the Lamais of it. Why? Because even if meaning what's the Torah of Nashim not to go out to war? So there's Yerushalmi Yavamis that says that it's not dark, that a Isha is not Mechuyev in Peri V'Rivya, because it says V'Kivshua, and she's not a Bas Melchama. She's not Ein Dark Shal Isha Likavesh, like the Gemara says in Kedushin on Beis or Beis. Mela, she's not going to be nichlal in the mitzvah of fighting the war. So what's Kala Mechupasa? What are we talking about over here? So the Radaz explains that the idea is that she's potter from having Shavuot Brachas. The Shavuot Brachas on his battle, they go to war and they don't do Shavuot Brachas. If a war happens that they have to go to during their Shavuot Brachas. So there's a famous Ran at the beginning of the second parak in Kedushin that says that Be'etzem, a Isha, Hagan, she's not mechuyev in the midst of Peri V'Rivya Be'etzem, but she's a chelik. It's not just that she's a chelik in a mitzvah, but she's also Misayeya, which is a little more than just being a chelik in a mitzvah. But the concept is that by Peri V'Rivya, the mitzvah is that the ikar mitzvah is on the Baal, and she's tafel to the Baal. So there's no chiyuv that's going to be done another chiyuv. Okay, that's point number one. Number two is kedai to see the Sefer HaChinuch, Mitzvah Tavchav Hey, and I want to go through it. Hagam, it's not focusing so much on Nashim versus Anashim in the war, but he brings out a very stark Nakuda about the Zayin Umas, which is going to be Negeah for us throughout the Hemshech of Sefer Yeshua. And then after that, we'll go to see a Tshuva and Tzitz Eliezer. So Mitzvah Tavchav Hey, sagt der Mitzvahs Harigas Shiva Amamin is a mitzvah to kill out the 7 nations. Larik Shiva Amamin HaMachzikim Ba'artzeinu, to kill out the 7 nations that occupy our land. Terem Kivashnu Isamehem, before we get it. It's a mitzvah to kill them before we take over the land. Ve'emaknani ve'amayri chulu ula'abdom b'chol makom shenim tzayim, and to kill them and to destroy them wherever we find them. Sounds like even if you find them outside Eretz Yisrael. And you should get rid of them, totally uproot them and destroy them. This mitzvah is repeated again in Parsha Shoftim. Okay, fine. The idea of the mitzvah, the understanding of the mitzvah is the concept is that these 7 nations are the ones that started doing tremendous amounts of Avodah Zarah, and all kinds of other disgusting things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu despises. Being that the Ikar by them is Avodah Zarah, and that is the way that they see everything, that's the way that they see the world. So we're mitzvah to erase them and to destroy them mitachas hashamayim. And there should be no remnant or any remembrance of these people in Eretz Yisrael. And because of our commandment that we have to totally destroy them, we have a side benefit from that. Because when we're destroying them, we're not going to learn from their ways. The fact that we're destroying people that are Oived Avodah Zarah will be mechazik ourselves, and we'll take mussar from it, that we ourselves shouldn't go after Avodah Zarah. Being that we're chasing after and hunting down every single last one of these people from this terrible bad family, to kill them because they're being Isaac and Avodah Zarah, no one's going to even have a havamina or a thought to do any of the meisim that these people were doing. Vein lishal klal. So he says, he brings up a very gewaldige point. Vein lishal klal. Lama nivru umesaroy zelu. Why did Hashem create all these people? It almost looks like Hashem created these nations that we could destroy them. Over he says, this is from the biggest Yisaidus, permission was granted to each individual to make a choice of Bechira, to be Beicha B'Tayv, to be Beicha B'Ra. Hashem doesn't force a person to choose one of them. Came, and after that, Nemar, Kishiva Amam Elu Kilkulu Maseyam, Vershiu Achenis Chayvu, Kulon, Avodanu Mavas. They had a chance to not do Avodah Zarah. If they decided to do Avodah Zarah, so that's their issue. That's why now they deserve to get punished and killed. Originally, when they were created, there was fine opportunities for them to be nen and to take benefits and to take pleasures from this world. And that's the concept also of what they did to destroy Amalek also. Because they didn't have to start a Pradiyat, and the fact that they started a Pradiyat didn't cause them to get destroyed. And if you're willing, we'll say more. Maybe at one point they were good people. It's almost like he's being dandam l'kavschus. Maybe at one point they were good people. And because of the mitzvahs and the good things that they did, Hashem created them. Right? It's very interesting because the first Rashi in Parshas Bereshis, Rashi says, Lasis lam nachlas goyim. Right? To chase this one out and to say that they chased that one out, then it ultimately boils down to the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu chooses who he wants, but not based on a random, like a raffle just pulled one out of the hat, but because we do the Ratan Hashem. Because it was Oila, it was Bereshis, it's really Shalosh Bereshis, that was Oila Machat El Boris Tchilo. Or maybe there was even one good person that came out of these Zayinumas that because of that it was worth it for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to create all of them. Like one Chacham that we know from the Gemara, Antoninus was a descendant of Amalek. Now what hit me was because there's a shaila in the Girsais and a different print of the Sefer Chinuch who this is referring to. Of course, like the Gemara says, who was that? But to me, one of the first things that I thought of when the Sefer Chinuch says this was the Rachav Hazayna, and that it married Yeshua. And the Gemara says that there were Nevi'im and all kinds of Chashva people that came out from that, from them. And Akash Baruch Hu doesn't hold back from doing that to create so many people just because one good person is going to come out from that. Akash Baruch Hu doesn't see any extra effort or any hard work, and he does what he sees fit. He just has an idea, and it comes true. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one that truly understands all our deeds and all our thoughts behind our deeds. And he knows what each and every single one of his creations and creatures need because he created it. He created us for him. Or we could say another pshat, maybe HaKadosh Baruch Hu created them that other people should learn from them that this is what happens if you do Avodah Zarah. Right? That's interesting because the Yerushalmi says, and the Rambam brings a halacha that before you start a war with the country, you have to send them messages, to give them opportunity to get out of there. Right? You can't just go and blow them up. You have to give them a warning. You tell them you could either join join us or fight us, l'shalom, and if not, or you could go on your way, and then they have a right to start the war. As I say. Or he says another pshat, maybe they should build cities and plant gardens and vineyards for the Yidden, which also struck me as interesting because we know two things about this. Number one, we know that the Nigei Batim was brought about to bring out the Machmonias that the Amorim hid in the walls. That's number one. And number two, the famous verse from the Rambam in that if the entire world was created b'shvil Yisrael, so you could even have the Rambam brings a mashal that a person is in some faraway country, and you have a person who becomes a multi-billionaire, and he has a huge property, is a huge estate. Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu give that to him? Because one day down the line, there's going to be a little yiddish somewhere in China that's doing kashrus, and it's going to be pouring rain. I don't know if it rains in China or not, but it's going to be pouring rain, and this house is going to have an awning over it, and sticking out of it, and this yiddish is going to be able to stand there and stay dry. That's everything we feel Yisrael, right? But there was also, so these people had no idea what they were doing. They were building cities, and they were building up land, all Kedei that Klal Yisrael should have it ready for them when they move in, into Eretz Yisrael. Midina HaMitzvah, Zak Sefer Chinuch Masham Zechernim Levracha, which is, he's referring to the Rambam, She'ein Melech Yisrael Nichlam Tchila L'Melchemes Mitzvah. The first war that a Melech has to fight is the Melchemes Mitzvah, She Melchemes Sheva Amim Min HaNiskar. That's fighting off these 7 nations. U'Melchemes HaMalek. U'Melchemes Ezras Yisrael Mi'at Tzor Sheba Aleim. And to fight off to protect the Yidden and to help the Yidden from enemies that are trying to start up with them. In these wars, he does not need to seek permission from Bezdin. And the rest of the halachas of the wars, we know that. And here is a very good thing to keep in mind. This mitzvah is noted with males and females that they're mechuyev to go after every single one of the Zayin Umas and kill them out. In any place, meaning not specific to Eretz Yisrael, and any time, not specific to the time of Yeshua going into Eretz Yisrael. But there's one caveat over here, he says, that we have the power to kill them. Dahainu, if today's Israeli army, in a sense, would know that some of these Arabs that they're killing, some of these Hamasniks and Hezbollahniks that they're killing are from the Shiva Umas, so then they get a huge mitzvah. I mean, they're getting a mitzvah because of Melchemes Ezras Yisrael Mi'atzor Sheba Aleim. That's another parsha. But it would make it much more of a Melchemes mitzvah if they would know what they were doing. Because of Rambam Zal B'Sefer HaMitzvahs, and he's coming to be mad with this halacha. He says, the Rambam says in Sefer HaMitzvahs, maybe you'll think that this is a mitzvah that's not noeg l'deiros. For the most part, the 7 nations are already lost. Only a person who doesn't understand the concept of the mitzvahs, which mitzvahs are, we do have to keep for generations, and the mitzvahs that, and he doesn't understand the concept of how mitzvahs work, whether it's noeg l'deiros or not noeg l'deiros. Klal dvarav zal, and this is the klal that the Rambam says. Sheyesh l'chol hadas. It's important for you to know. Ki kol mitzvah shalei tia asiyas nederes machma shavar zmano. That any mitzvah that doesn't become obsolete because of the time that passed, could go mitzvah shrei b'midbar of lacher came ba'oretz, specific mitzvahs that Klal Yisrael had in the midbar that they didn't have in Eretz Yisrael. V'chein mitzvahs hasobas nachlosh lehoysa leloysa dor shrei b'chilukot v'chnisas la'oretz, or the specific mitzvahs that they had to set up and divide up the land for the Shvatim when they came into Eretz Yisrael. These are the mitzvahs that are not noeg l'deiros. Just because we don't have the proper tools and the proper opportunities or the proper availability to do this mitzvah doesn't mean it's not noeg l'deiros. It's not totally in a specific zman to kill the Zayin Umas, like when there's a Beis HaMikdash, when there's not Beis HaMikdash. For example, like this mitzvah to totally eradicate and destroy the 7 Umas and Amalek, where the pasuk is telling us that we have to erase their names and to totally destroy them in each and every generation in which we could find them. Meaning, even though David HaMelech, from the times of Yeshua till David HaMelech, we did a very good job destroying them and finishing them off until there were very, very few left of them. That they were so spread out and they got so assimilated. I mean, those few that still existed got assimilated in the other nations to the point that we don't even remember where they're from anymore. But even if we don't have the ability right now to chase after them and to kill them, don't say that this is a mitzvah that's not noyik. It's not just for this mitzvah, but it's for other mitzvahs also. Understand this Yisod, this Iker, and be mechazek in it. Understand it well. However, I'll say, a person who's over on this, when he has an opportunity to kill one of the people from the Zion Umas and he doesn't, as long as he's not putting his life in danger, so Ibn Chasinuch says, so maybe we'll get back to that. There's a mitzvah of Hachrim Tachrimim, that's a mitzvah to say, and there's also a lav of Leisachai Kol Neshama, K'meshen Nichtab, Seif Sein Sheftim, Betz Hashem, the Siman Tov Kuf, Chav Ches, that's where he discusses the Isser of Leisachai Kol Neshama. Okay.